Hi, I'm Hasara Nwangi. Now, we all buy stuff from different vendors for different purposes, right? Business entities are the same. They also need goods and services because they cannot fulfill everything on their own. So, this procurement function is not simple as it is for an individual. So, to talk about this procurement function, we have a very experienced personnel with us. He is Mr. Tilak Rahulan, Head of Supply Chain Management at Dialog Axiata. Hello, Mr. Tilak.
Hi, Hasara.
Now, you have led Sri Lanka's #1 corporate Dialog Axiata in supply chain management. So, how do you see all these functions?
Well, the function supply chain and procurement is considered quite new to all industries. Now, what I see is in today's business world, a lot of leaders, they focus on business units, finance, marketing, HR. Likewise, the concept of supply chain and procurement was introduced about 20 years back. Even if you think about a parent who would be encouraging their kids to go to school and they would be saying, you can become a doctor, you can become an engineer, or you can become an accountant, but very few parents would say, can't you become an SCM or a procurement professional? So likewise, this function is quite new to all industries, but in today's business world, it has become a very important function because of quite few reasons. One, as you correctly said previously, like individuals, even organizations are involved in procurement functions, purchasing. But when an organization is doing a purchase, there are certain criteria and points that they need to consider. So how can an organization consider the correct criteria and bring in the best valued product or the service to the organization is a key. So from that perspective, in today's business world, the function procurement and supply chain has become a very key element of the entire organization. What I see is in today's business world, some organizations, they are struggling to really understand what the supply chain function means. From a definition point of view, what I see, a supply chain starts from an idea in a boardroom, where the management of the organization discuss about new idea. And it ends with the customer. So the entire journey of that idea being converted into a product or a service, being delivered to the end customer, the entire journey is supply chain. So in businesses, managing this function is very important. We all know that customer is the king. We all talk about customers king, they are being always right. So how can an organization properly provide the product and the service that they desire? And if we do not do that, then definitely the customer will be dissatisfied, and from an organization point of view, they would lose the customer. So working backwards, this entire value chain or the supply chain, managing this is an important concept for an organization.
Right. So Diriya.lk is catering to stakeholders of micro, small and medium enterprises. But when compared to Dialog Axiata, it's a large corporate, so this is very different. So how would you see these differences?
From a framework perspective, I seriously don't see any difference. Because what I see is which organization, considering the size or even industry, the principles are the same. There are clear processes and procedures that an organization should establish, irrespective of their size. So if you take a very small and a medium scale organization, let's see how they're going to start the procurement function. They need to understand what items or services that they need to procure and how frequently. Based on that, they need to develop their procurement processes and systems. Some small organizations might not be able to come up with large-scale ERP systems because of their cost pressure, but they need to have some sort of controls. Now, what I see in a lot of industries, when people talk about procurement, the first thing that comes to their mind is price. So, some professionals in many industries think that the procurement people in these organizations, their duty is talking to suppliers, negotiating and bringing the price down. That is a wrong concept or a wrong understanding. Procurement is all about identifying what is needed by that organization and then looking out in the market what are the options that would cater this need, looking at alternative options that could be used as substitutes, then making a decision what sort of a product or a service that would really need. Based on that, they need to understand who are the potential suppliers, vendors who can come and provide these products or services. Doing your background study is very much important on these suppliers. And then planning, having discussions, negotiating prices, and of course, not only prices, that product should cater the end requirement. So, procurement is always a team game. A procurement function, they cannot operate solely. They need to work with all the divisions in a respective organizations, and it's a collective decision altogether. So, end of the day, the procurement function will ensure, after looking at all these options in the market, that they will bring in the best valued product or service to the organization. So, it could be from a requirement perspective, from a price perspective, from a warranty perspective, and from a sustainability perspective. So, what I just explained could be established or practiced in any organization irrespective of their size. What has happened recently with the technology development, a lot of automation has come into this entire procurement process. So, large organizations might invest in these technologies and they can implement the ERP systems or sourcing platforms. But small scale organizations, they do not have to do it right now, but they can have a manual system, but the transparency, governance and the end objective would be always the same.
Right. So you mentioned about, rights and wrongs. So let's talk a bit about, applicable laws and regulations. And what are the standards for procuring activities?
Well, there are no specific laws for procurement per se. So the general country's law will be applicable. But what we need to understand is when you are doing a procurement, it's a very financial transaction. So everything needs to be very transparent and everything needs to be documented properly. For an example, if an organization is going to purchase something from a supplier for a 3-year period on a frequent basis, then after having the discussions, after agreeing on terms and conditions, these things should be properly documented in a proper legal contract. Because what I see in today's business world, some organizations, they, after having an agreement, they don't have a proper contract. Sometimes contract is available, but all agreed terms are not included. So down the line, when there are some issues, then people would starting pointing finger at each other. They would say, at discussion stages, we discuss, you agreed, why are not coming and adhering right now. So basic principle, whatever you discuss, draft it in a contract, both parties should agree and should be signed by respective authorities.
Right. So now that you talked about this documentation and drafting contracts, so let's also talk a bit about regular practices in managing and controlling procurement activities.
So there are so many practices that a procurement function would be practicing within an organization. So the main function would be, they would be directly controlling the main capital expenditure and the operational expenditure of an organization, what we call it as CapEx and OpEx. So usually what we see is a procurement function would be controlling close to 80 to 90% of a company's expenditure. Also what we see is as good practices, talking about the processes of a procurement function, well, what happens is the procurement function will get involved with the business units beginning of the year to understand what sort of requirements they have throughout the year. Based on that, the procurement function would come up with a procurement plan, and then based on the requirements, there would be a tendering process. So there are documents such as RFPs, requests for quotations. So the procurement function would contact with the potential vendors, get their respective proposals from a technical perspective as well as from a commercial perspective, and there will be joint evaluations by the technical or the user division and the commercial team. And then based on that, as I said previously, the best valued product or the service would be selected. The main point that we need to understand is any procurement function, irrespective of industry, size of the organization, the procurement process should be very transparent, because we are dealing with money, okay? And there could be a lot of areas where fraud could happen. Suppliers might come and give bribe, and some members of the procurement team sometimes, they might go into wrong activities. So we need to be very much transparent all the time. So that's my advice from a process perspective.
Right, talking about transparency, ethics and best practices are very important. So how do you see and why this is important?
As I said previously, a lot of fraud and wrong practices could happen in a procurement transaction. So both parties, starting from the supplier and the buying organization, they need to be very transparent, and also they need to be upfront, very clear on the expectations. So if you take even Axiata, we have 4 key values: uncompromised integrity and exceptional performance. So the integrity is very much important for a procurement function, because they are representing their organization from a financial perspective with the respective suppliers. Also what I see is there are other good practices that we need to follow. Now, for an example, the procurement function is responsible with the upstream, meaning their suppliers. So whatever the suppliers do and how they react, the procurement function is responsible. Let's take an example. Now, the label Nike. In Sri Lanka, we have garment factories who are manufacturing Nike products. So if those factories are purchasing their products or the raw materials, say fabric or trims, from Chinese market, and if malpractices are happening in those organizations, well, that directly impacts Nike. Because in the Western world, when a customer walks into a store and if they are buying a brand called Nike, and if they get to know Nike has produced this through labor or materials where malpractice is happening, then it's very bad on the label of Nike. Same way for any industry. Procurement function just can't say, no, I don't know what is happening in the suppliers area. No, it's the procurement function's responsibility to go and select a correct and appropriate supplier who would have the correct framework and infrastructure also. So those practices are very critical irrespective of any industry.
Right. So it's very obvious that it's important to understand the procurement operations of larger companies when talking about the smaller companies. So do you have any tips to give for the small business holders or smaller entities in designing their procurement operations?
As mentioned previously, the principles are same, because end of the day, any customer who is at the end of the supply chain would expect only 3 things: a quality product at a very good price and fast. So how can a procurement function in an organization, irrespective of size, can deliver that? 3 ways. If the procurement function can select the best supplier who can give you the best quality, then how can they manage the cost? And then how can they deliver it fast? My advice would be, I know technology is developing, but focus on these 3 main objectives, because those are your income. How can you provide the best quality product at the best price, and how can you deliver that fast? If you design your process to cater these 3, I think that will be the starting point. Based on that, then they can go to their respective certain level.
Right. I'm sure you have worked with many micro, small and medium enterprises who are working as suppliers for your organization. And in the system, where should they improve? Or because all these large companies or government sector, the processes are complex. So in which aspects should they be improved?
Most of the suppliers that large organizations are working, they are private organizations. And these large organizations are listed. So the listed organizations are audited very seriously. So there is a process, and the procurement function along with the suppliers, they need to adhere to the process. One of the biggest challenges I see is most of the suppliers, they don't come back with proposals or come back with options on time. Punctuality is one of the biggest problems I see in Sri Lanka as a whole. So when you define the process, when a tender is being shared, there would be a certain deadline, because we need to be transparent and we need to be reasonable with everyone. Most of the suppliers, they either come and submit the proposals late, or they will come at the 11th hour and ask for extensions. But they need to understand that there is an end deliverable. If the procurement gets delayed, the project gets delayed. The project gets delayed, then customers' delivery is getting delayed. So punctuality is very important. Second thing is, suppliers, sometimes they don't go into detail on the requirement. They might have what they will have, but not be catering an entire requirement. So they want to come and present something and to win business. I think they should go out of that mentality. They should understand the requirement fully. If they don't have the capacity to cater the full requirement, get hold of a subcontractor, club with them, and then see how can they provide the entire requirement. So if they can come back on time, punctuality, and if they can properly understand the requirement and give a solid solution, those are the two aspects that they need to focus on.
Right. As an experienced professional in this field, do you have any advice or a small tip for our micro, small and medium enterprises?
Since they are small and medium, they need to focus more on their cost. So they might not have a procurement function per se, but they need at least to have a smart individual who would understand this entire process and function. Start small, it's okay, but understand the concept. Have the proper controls, have the process, have the transparency. Then grow from that level.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Tilak. This was a very interesting and an insightful discussion, and I'm sure our viewers would agree the same. So let's meet again with another insightful discussion. Thank you.